like, eh. That's why I think that Easter is so chocolate forward at that time of year. It's like a coping mechanism for us. You know, this past Easter, I went into a Sobeys and realized that they sell 2 chocolate rabbits. One named Mr. Munchie, and the other named Mr. Solid. And those 2 are my new stoned persona names. Mr. Munchie is pretty self-explanatory. He likes food. And Mr. Solid is the stoned me who's horny, because you get it. One thing I do love about spring is the near constant rain. It really does improve the local theater scene. Have y'all noticed? No one else is paying attention to this? Every time it rains, you can see your local worms performing a live reenactment on the sidewalk of that one scene from Saving Private Ryan. Lately on our walks, my girlfriend is convinced that I'm going to be attacked by a chipmunk. Because every time I see a chipmunk on our walks, I do that thing where I crouch down and I hold my hand out and I click my tongue at it like, and I have no food. And every time she says, if you don't have any food, you're gonna get attacked. That's my girlfriend, not the chipmunk. The chipmunk usually just says something like, in response. So okay, we've got Easter, we've got rain, and spring cleaning. Now there's a fun spring activity. The other day, I think I irreversibly damaged my girlfriend's apartment while cleaning. I think I vacuumed up what could only be referred to as load-bearing dust. Like okay, this dust, I need to paint a picture here. This dust has been in her life longer than I have. And I vacuumed it up and then just heard something kind of shift in the ceiling. So I warned my partner, and we just don't use that room anymore. Finally, let's talk a little bit more about my surgery for a moment, because that's taking place in spring, and it's kind of like a spring cleaning for my body. I have a mass about the size of a ping pong ball being removed from me on Monday, and I do plan on playing beer pong with it afterwards, because I want a really fucked up biopic. When I found out that we would be spring cleaning my body, I met the surgeon who was going to be doing it. He's a urology type surgeon. And it turns out that urologist patients usually aren't in their 20s. I think I brought the average age in that waiting room down by a factor of 9. Okay, I don't know how factors work, but everyone else there was a little older than me, if you catch the drift. So I'm in the waiting room, and there was a whole grand total of 2 magazines for all of us to read. And they were really catering to that mature demographic. I do appreciate their in-touchness with their client base. The first one was an extreme sports magazine with a dude doing a snowboard jump on the front cover. Something everyone 50 and older can do and relate to. And of course the other magazine was simply titled Good Times. Where was the Canadian Home and Gardens? Where is the Zoomer magazine? Where were the pamphlets telling me how to monitor my prostate health? I know what you're thinking. Good Times, that sounds age appropriate. Well, joke's on you, because the cover of Good Times featured a 20-something blonde lady smiling and petting a dog. And its leading article was How to Save for Retirement. Which should be a joke to any age demographic, because the people there were definitely too late to start saving for retirement. And the people it was targeting, which is apparently my age group, will never earn enough to save for retirement. We just learned how large the incision was going to be, and it was pretty shocking. But it did present an unexpected challenge. How was I going to describe this without using the term pubic mound, or pubic area, or pubic region? Especially when describing why I couldn't return to work to my boss. And since the first part of that phrase is pubic, for the longest time while searching for a new word in that conversation, I just kept saying pubic, pubic, and eventually just had to settle on my above dick area, or area dick-D1 as I'm calling it these days. Coming to terms with mortality is never fun, so let's talk about that. Recently, my friend's grandmother did pass away. Her grandmother was a pretty remarkable and fun-loving lady. And in addition to some great stories, she left behind something that everyone in the family could share. A musical parody set to the sound of music, written entirely about golfing. Now I hate golf, But this musical slapped. Her grandkids performed it at the funeral, and that got me thinking about like a universal question. How will people remember me when I die? Like, will I leave behind something that can bring people joy like that? What's my musical parody? I guess I do have my stand-up, so would my loved ones just perform excerpts of my stand-up at my funeral? Because I don't think that is appropriate. Like, can you imagine my dad, who's here tonight, getting up on stage and coming up to the podium to say something sweet about me at my funeral, and just stepping up and saying, I believe it was Matt that said, "It's me, the Test Tickler. I'm here to tickle you with my long ball pubes." Which is a real joke I told at the last set. Speaking of grandmas, I already regret this transition deeply. Let's try that one again. When you visit your family after a good long absence, they'll catch you up on all of those stories that you haven't heard. And I heard one that I have to share with y'all. So, my grandma isn't a regular grandma. She is what I call a cool grandma. And like many cool seniors, she has some very cool chronic pain. But, like a few seniors, she is embracing the pain-relieving power of weed. I told you I got a cool grandma. As anyone who has ever dabbled with edibles knows, there is a ton of variation product to product. You got homemade and store-bought, those will kick in at different rates, and the effects will vary. You know, sometimes you'll even take the same thing, and it'll just hit you different. You know, maybe you hadn't eaten enough that day, maybe you haven't drank enough and you're a little dehydrated, who knows? Anyways, my grandma has a routine. If she's out for a long walk or going out to run some errands, she'll pop a couple of CBD gummy bears and head on her way. On the day our story takes place, our heroine is running a little late. Her daughter, my mom, is on her way to take our heroine to the optometrist. Grandma's joints are a little achier than usual, so she pops a couple of those little bears on her way out the door. The trouble started about halfway to the optometrist's office. Grandma was feeling a little sick. I don't know about these gummies. They feel a bit different. Maybe this was a bad pack. In that moment, it all clicked into place for my mom. Rewind a few weeks earlier. Grandma had been interested in trying out some of those new gummies. My mom bought her some of the new ones, noticed that the packaging looked nearly identical, and explained carefully that these were THC and would feel very different from the CBD she was used to. That's right, everyone. Turns out that day, my grandma grabbed the wrong packet and went from consuming no THC in her entire life to consuming 40 milligrams in one sitting. Which isn't much for an established stoner, like myself, but is enough to lay her out in a major way. They arrived at the optometrist, and my mom explains the mix-up to my grandma, who shifted at that moment from chill and a little dizzy to hyper-paranoid and very dizzy. She's asking how high she looks, how dilated her pupils are, if her eyes are bloodshot, wondering if her iris has turned green like weed. And my mom is reassuring her that the only thing giving her away is how paranoid she's acting right now. Once her appointment has begun, my grandma is worried that the optometrist is going to find out. So to make sure that he never figures it out, she outs herself. How are you doing today, Gladys? Well, I took a medication for my pain, and it's acting a little different. Oh, what medication? Well, I took some gummies. And the doctor is 100% sure she's high at this point. I mean, she is fully narked on herself. And it's important to note that back in the day, my grandma was one of the first female cops in our town, so she's great at narking. After the appointment, she's feeling a little unsteady on her feet, so the doc helps her back to the chair in the waiting room with my mom, and he sets her down in a way that my mom could only describe as me as, he poured her into a chair. Now my mom asks how grandma is doing because she can tell that the doctor is in the know now, and he replies with a little twinkle in his eye, she's making some great choices. Now my grandma had made her peace with the doc knowing, but she had a new worry. She was worried that her siblings were going to find out. See, here's the thing. Her and her siblings, my great aunt and uncle, all go to the same eye doctor. But I don't think they're gonna find out because all of them have different last names, and it's in Ontario where doctors aren't just chit-chatting about your family members to you. Now keep in mind that that is going on, and she is very worried about it. But she gets out to the car, she's relieved, she sits down and takes a brief 2-hour nap, and then they hit the Taco Bell on the way home, and then the 7-Eleven, and then they drop her off, and she's still a little paranoid that they're going to figure it out. Now my grandma is at home, and the story doesn't end there because she's nervous. So she does the best thing that she could think of to keep her brother and sister from ever finding out that she was high. She calls them and immediately outs herself to them. And as you know, she was a cop, and she's great at narking. I'm really proud of my grandma, though, because this experience hasn't discouraged her from trying to use weed in the future, and she's enjoyed it in the recent times that she has. But some of her siblings were intrigued after that conversation,